So great, thank you, Robin. Good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today to talk to you about a topic that I consider of critical importance for national statistical offices and the research community. Access to trusted statistical information underpins democratic societies as it supports evidence-based decision-making and allows for sound decision-making by governments, businesses, the research community, and private citizens. StatsCan was established almost 100 years ago and is committed to ensuring Canadians have access to objective sources of statistics to meet Canadians' highest priority information needs and to inform debate on critical public policy issues. As is the case for most institutions these days, we are dealing with both continuous and accelerating change in the environment in which we operate, and in the opportunities and challenges the environment presents to us. Change and the need to be continuously innovative are permanent features of our collective futures. So there are a number of environmental pressures facing national statistical offices, and they're no way restricted to Canada. Most are faced with declining budgets arising from their respective governments' need to address budget deficits. At the same time, the demands for new statistical information continues to escalate. Another reality we face is that technological advances have made it more difficult to reach people. Call display and call screening hinder our ability to get a respondent to answer the telephone. As well, more and more households have only cell phones or use internet phones. All of this makes it more challenging to ensure representative samples and high response rates. We also have a mandate to collaborate with all levels of government to develop a well-integrated, coherent national system of statistics that minimizes duplication and reporting burden on Canadians. Privacy concerns are more and more front and center. The need for statistics will always conflict with expectations of privacy. The challenge is to find the correct balance between achieving a quality of data acceptable for decision-making and respecting citizens' expectations to be left alone. At the same time, Statistics Canada is constantly looking for alternatives to current approaches and more extensively use both existing as well as new data sources, where it introduces improvements along quality, timeliness, burden, or cost dimensions. The Stats Act provides Statistics Canada with the authority to requisition administrative data from all levels of government and other organizations for statistical purposes. StatsCan has a long tradition of using administrative data to reduce the cost and response burden of its programs or to provide new information not currently available while maintaining or improving quality or timeliness. While the range of administrative files available in Canada may be more limited than in some countries, Stats Canada is recognized internationally as a leader in the use of administrative data for statistical purposes. Since the creation of the Dominion Bureau of Statistics in 1918, Stats Canada has increasingly made use of administrative data on imports and exports via customs data, in vital statistics, birth registrations, education, health, immigration and justice data, income tax returns, and employment insurance records. Today, Stats Canada uses over 500 administrative files in its statistical programs, with 40% of the agency's programs based in whole or in part on administrative data. The sources of the administrative data are 37% federal, 26% provincial territorial, and 37% from other sources, the latter including municipalities, non-profit organizations, and the private sector. The main uses of administrative data are to replace survey data in businesses and household surveys, to maintain business and dwelling frames for conducting surveys, and to benchmark economic and social statistics and to certify data. These data are increasingly used by Stats Canada to create new and enriched data sets through record linkage. In the past decade, Stats Canada has conducted a wide array of such linkages which have contributed significantly to the socioeconomic research base in Canada. There are more than 50 initiatives currently underway at the agency that explore the potential to use and to extend or use administrative data to either replace survey data in whole or in part, or to answer questions which cannot be answered with existing data. To no one's surprise, big data is the topic of the day in most statistical offices. For Stats Canada, there's no real distinction between big data and the more traditional concept of administrative data, which is essentially any data generated as a result of some administrative or business process within a government business or other institution. By this definition, income tax data and health insurance transactions, retail scanner data, telephone and utility bills, credit card transactions, electricity meter data are all examples of administrative data sets. While some of these files can be very large, they are often larger than they need to be for statistical purposes, can easily be thinned through sampling. On the other hand, the comprehensiveness of the files can open up the potential for critically important small area data at a reasonable cost. StatsCan has a long track record in both survey taking and using administrative files and has developed a degree of expertise in the development of methodology and software for record linkage. We also operate within a well-defined legislative framework, which requires a review of the privacy impact of each record linkage request and must be in accordance with the Statistics Act and the Privacy Act. And the benefits must clearly outweigh the invasion of privacy. All records linkage proposals are reviewed for scientific merit, viability, and the need for access to microdata, and Stats Canada's Executive Committee approves all record linkage requests. We also are fully transparent when it comes to approved record linkage projects, which include an annual report to Parliament on privacy and a summary of all approved record linkages on our website. On the accessibility front, we've removed all obstacles to the redissemination of our information by other organizations. Researchers have access to both microdata and linked data via our 27 research data centers located across the country and universities. And there's no charge to university researchers, just a little bit of paperwork. We know that that record linkage represents an enormous potential for health research. By combining data sets, the analytical potential of the information is increased significantly. By linking information from a health survey with administrative hospitalizations and mortality data, analysis can be conducted to understand the association between behavioral and environmental risk factors and the use of hospital services and related outcomes. Analysis of this type without record linkage would be both costly and burdensome because new data would have to be collected. When we link administrative health data, such as hospital and vital statistics data, with health survey data, such as the Canadian Community Health Survey, we have an opportunity to better understand, for example, the impact of lifestyle factors and health outcomes. StatsCan is also uniquely positioned to link non-health related data sources, such as the census, immigration, and employment data, to further understand the broader determinants of health. StatsCan is currently preparing new research files that will link responses at the individual level from all cycles of the cross-sectional Canadian Community Health Survey to hospital records of survey respondents over an extended period of time. The Linkage project is intended to better understand and quantify the association between risk factors, whether they are behavioral, socioeconomic, or environmental, and health outcomes at the individual and population level. We also intend to make the data available in our research data centers later this year. As I noted earlier, one of the key advantages of record linkages is our ability to create large nationally representative population-based cohorts to study rare outcomes and regional comparisons, and in this case, examine the long-term effects of industrial and environmental exposure. It also allows the creation of prospective cohorts to determine the impact of risk and exposure on long-term health outcomes from pollution or workplace contaminants on mortality. One example is a record linkage study conducted in partnership with Health Canada to examine the effects of air pollution on life expectancy, evidence needed to inform policy and regulatory developments related to the new Canadian ambient air quality standards. We brought together data from the 1991 census long form with 10 years of mortality and air pollution data to study the impacts of small particulate matter on non-accidental death. The development of these linked data was critical since prior to this, most air quality cohort studies were conducted in the US on specialized groups not representative of the general population and certainly not representative of the Canadian population, or our levels of pollution would tend to be lower. The findings of this study revealed that long-term exposure to even low amounts of small particulate matter pose a significant risk for life expectancy. A second key advantage is the ability to bring together data sources that allow us to identify key subpopulations not otherwise identifiable in our administrative health data sources to better understand their outcomes. This was the goal when we worked with provincial and territorial ministries of health to link the 2006 census long form with hospital data to study the use of hospital services among immigrant populations. The rich information provided in the census allowed us to not only identify immigrants, but also second-generation Canadians to determine if they continued to experience the health advantage that we typically see among their parents. The results of this study clearly indicate that, overall, the health advantage experienced by immigrants are diminishing among the second generation, as their rates of cardiovascular hospitalization are closer to the third generation or more. Perhaps more important are the differences we see by source country. While we see similar patterns of diminishing health among both the South Asian and Chinese communities, the rates of hospitalization for cardiovascular disease continues to remain significantly lower among those of the Chinese Canadian community. These findings have important implications for health service delivery as we see the health advantage of immigrants diminish in the next generation. Recent technological advances have facilitated and reduced the cost of manipulating large administrative files. There is also renewed interest in administrative records as an alternative to the relatively expensive collection costs of statistical surveys and censuses. In response, innovative work is underway at Stats Canada on a proof of concept initiative to create a social domain record linkage environment. This environment would increase the efficiency through which data linkages could be undertaken across various administrative and household survey data sets. This tool will reduce the cost and time required to conduct record linkage, facilitate the linking of data across any number of sources, including health, justice, education, census, and tax data, and enhance the analytical potential of these existing data sources. It consists of two main components: a derived record and key depository. And a critical point I'd like to communicate is that the SDRLE is not a large linked database of integrated survey information. It's a way to manage linkage activities. What does it look like? Well, to build the derived record depository for the SDRLE, the personal identifiers of individuals from administrative files are brought into the environment and linked together to create a historical depository of linkable information for individuals. Only the direct identifiers of the individuals necessary for record linkage are brought into the environment, and this information is used to generate an anonymous identifier. Administrative files and survey data files are then linked to the derived record depository, and the record keys for those files are linked to the anonymous identifier in the depository. The associations between the record keys and the anonymous identifier are stored in the key depository. Once a study cohort has been defined, these linkage keys can then be used to find the records associated with cohort members across all the databases comprising the SDRLE. The SDRLE is essentially a virtual linking environment, and there's no need to build a large integrated database. We also know that longitudinal surveys are expensive and difficult to sustain. We are actively looking to see if it's feasible to use this environment to extend the life of some of our existing longitudinal surveys. A pilot is underway to link 5 discontinued longitudinal surveys to ongoing outcomes from administrative data sets using this environment. There are a number of reasons why the time is right to move aggressively using this approach. Firstly, Stats Canada is looking more than ever at new opportunities to better use administrative and other data sources. At the same time, data gaps for both current and emerging needs can also be addressed using administrative data without imposing reporting burden on Canadians by making use of data they've already provided. As well, the rising demand for small area data, which cannot usually be obtained from sample surveys, points to administrative records as a source of these data. We recognize that there's no one data source for any one survey that can address all the complex questions at play in the social arena. But by bringing together multiple data sources, we increase our opportunity to examine social outcomes and to better understand social determinants. We know that the road to truly understanding complex social phenomena requires us to cross multiple social domains that include pathways through education, the healthcare system, the justice system, the labor market, and so forth. The SDRLE allows us to explore ways to more efficiently link multiple data sources to examine complex public policy questions. The Census of Population is the largest statistical program conducted by Stats Canada and is legally mandated by both the Constitution Act and the Statistics Act. Constitutionally, census population counts are required to determine the number of federal electoral districts and to draw electoral boundaries. Census counts and their intercensus population estimates that are based on census counts are used to transfer over $60 billion annually to the provinces and territories under the Federal Provincial Fiscal Arrangements Act. These transfers include Canada Health and Social Transfers, the Equalization Program, and the Wait Time Reduction Transfer. Census counts are also used to benchmark household surveys, such as the Monthly Labour Force Survey, which serves as the basis for employment insurance benefits in Canada. A number of developed countries are moving toward greater use of administrative data to displace the need for a traditional census. In early 2011, StatsCan, as part of its planning for the 2016 census, commissioned a study of census-taking approaches used around the world. The study found that of all the countries that use an administrative register-based approach, they're able to do so because they have both a central population register and a universal personal identification number. Population registers in these countries are established by law for general government administration and require that all persons be registered and that they report changes such as births or a change of address to the register within a specified period of time. Population counts can be tabulated directly from the register on a regular basis. The PIN number is used to link other administrative sources to the Census Population Register to produce statistics on topics that are not part of the register, such as employment, education, health, and income. Because Canada neither has a population register nor a personal identification number, our studies concluded that such an approach was not feasible for the 2016 census. In Canada, the social insurance number, while prevalent, is not universal. I'll talk a bit more about that. Traditionally, the census of population has been conducted through a direct enumeration of the population that takes place every 5 years. The government's minimal information needs from the census of population are the name, date of birth, the usual place of residence at a specified period of time, sex, marital status of each individual, as well as the family and household composition. Two options are being explored for the 2021 census and beyond, and include the use of administrative sources without the need for a central population register or a personal identification number. This approach has since become known as the virtual population register approach. The first option would be to explore modifications to the existing federal income tax and benefit system, so it could serve as a single direct replacement for the census. The second option would be to link together information from existing sources of administrative data held by federal, provincial, and territorial government departments. At present, the first option appears to have some potential. However, in its present state, the tax and benefit system would not meet the constitutional and legislative requirements for the census of population due to gaps in both the coverage of the population and the variables collected. In addition, several conceptual differences exist between the census and the tax and benefit system that would have to be addressed. The national coverage of individuals in the tax system is 88% of the census count, with considerable variation by province, territory, age, and other key variables. With improvements, it's believed that the national coverage rate could reach 92%, but many individuals are expected to remain uncovered by the tax system. These include Aboriginals on reserves, children over 6 years old for whom benefits were never requested, recent immigrants, low-income Canadians who do not file tax returns, and marginalized persons such as the homeless. Strategies to capture missing information in individuals not covered in the tax system would need to be devised, such as targeted surveys for Aboriginal people on reserves, adding a separate schedule to the tax form to capture missing people and collect additional variables, and possibly making filing a tax return mandatory, even if individuals had no taxable income. To address missing information, a census supplement could be added to the tax return to gather missing census data such as household composition. To determine if the federal income tax system could be used to replace the enumerated head count for 2021 will require a thorough proof of concept study to evaluate the coverage of individuals, the comprehensiveness of the information, and to identify compliance issues as well as related cost and operational considerations for both the Canada Revenue Agency and Statistics Canada. The study would also need to evaluate potential impacts on the tax system and tax administration and tax filing compliance, and as well as public acceptance. While the overall conclusion at this point in time is that the current tax system without any significant changes is not an adequate replacement for the short-form census, this does not mean that such differences cannot be reconciled. Without question, significant federal, provincial, and territorial administrative data remains untapped. Governments at all levels assemble extensive administrative data files relating both to individuals and to businesses. In response to this, a second approach we are exploring would be to link together, using the social insurance number, existing government administrative data sources to create a database of Canadians that would be maintained on an ongoing basis. The goal of this option would be to determine the extent to which existing administrative data sources obtained from different levels of government could be used to create an up-to-date database on the population of Canada, and whether this linked database could be used as a replacement for the enumerated census headcount. To assess the accuracy of the coverage of the population using administrative sources would require that StatsCan collect and use the social insurance number in the 2016 census of population. This would allow StatsCan to conduct direct linkages at the individual level to broader administrative data sources and identify those who are missing. A number of different administrative sources could be used to create this linked environment. The basic concept would be to achieve nearly complete coverage of the population and the census variables by using a wide variety of sources. StatsCan currently has access to some, but not all, of the files that might be used in this approach. Our plans are to carefully test the ability, both the ability of Canadians to provide the social insurance number and their reaction to do so as part of a series of tests planned for this summer. To pursue either of these options, I've described several strategic considerations would have to be addressed before a decision to proceed could be made. First up would be to determine whether legislative and policy changes are required. Achieving a higher level of integration between statistical and administrative programs may require changes to federal legislation and compliance with constitutional requirements. The coverage, cost, as well as quality obtained by linking a wide array of administrative databases would have to be assessed. Administrative data are not necessarily of higher quality than survey data, frequently do not cover the full population of interest, and may use different concepts. The timeliness with which administrative data are available is also a consideration. It is also not a given that where it is possible to replace survey data with administrative data, it is more efficient to do so. Options to address content gaps would also need to be addressed. Modifying administrative programs to make their data more useful for statistical purposes may inadvertently have unacceptable consequences on the operations of the administrative program, such as a decline in cooperation. For example, adding questions on tax forms to collect more statistical data through the tax system may have a negative impact on tax compliance and therefore on revenue collection. Obtaining information on individuals not currently captured by the tax system, such as making tax filing mandatory, would need to be carefully assessed, as would the impact on tax software companies of asking additional non-tax related questions. StatsCan firmly believes that gaining broader access to government administrative files represents the greatest area of opportunity for the expansion of the statistical use of administrative data. Okay. Perhaps the most important considerations relate to those of privacy and public acceptance of such a fundamental change to conducting the census. These must be addressed more fully before moving forward with either approach. Based on experiences in many countries, public and media opinion can be polarized, volatile, and even inconsistent. Public opinion could be shaped by perception of privacy concerns over the use of administrative data for purposes other than that for which it was collected, the use of a social insurance number to generate census headcounts, or the Big Brother feature of compiling and linking multiple administrative databases. Context is also important in the evolution of public opinion. Government security initiatives in the United States have compiled extensive databases on individual, both domestic and foreign. When these initiatives surface as the object of media controversies, they tend to heighten concern in Canada around the uses of administrative data for purposes other than that for which they were initially collected. The U.S. Patriot Act and recent revelations about the activities of the U.S. National Security Agency are two examples of context setting that will cause concern about the Big Brother features of compiling and linking multiple administrative databases, even for statistical purposes. In Canada, some high-profile cases of security breaches in the handling of data such as the loss of an external hard drive in 2012 with information on Canada's student loan borrowers, has focused attention on the need to secure management and storage of personal information, especially for large data sets. Another example is the continuing concern by many Canadians over contracts for census technical support with Lockheed Martin Canada. A number of Canadians risk penalties under the Stats Act for refusing to complete the 2006 and 2011 censuses because they believed Lockheed Martin would have access to their personal information and could be compelled under the U.S. Patriot Act to provide that information to the U.S. government. At the same time, National Statistical Office is increasingly meeting with greater resistance to traditional survey-based census methods. In contrast, administrative-based censuses are largely invisible to citizens and therefore unlikely to generate spikes of controversy unless public attention is deliberately called to the issue. It is expected that a significant amount of public opinion research will be needed to identify the issues of concern to Canadians and to address them before any new approach was adopted. It also goes without saying that our plans include having conversations with privacy commissioners and that a full privacy impact assessment would be required. Based on experiences both in Canada and in the other countries, one should expect that the results of these dialogues and the privacy impact assessment will shape the development of an administrative data approach. In wrapping up, one of my favorite management relevant quotations is from Lewis Carroll. If you don't know where you're going, any road can get you there. Well, we know the road we need to follow, and it will challenge us to be more efficient in using our existing data holdings and including administrative data, big data, and applying data linkage methodologies. With imagination, energy, and better data integration, I know we can meet the challenge in responding to current and emerging public policy issues, even in the context of government austerity. Thank you.